Good. Well, welcome everybody to another in-depth OpenTEAM in-depth series. We're starting this in a little bit more formal way here and kicking it off today with Nick Honegger. Is that how I pronounce your last name?
It's close enough, Honegger.
Close enough.
Yeah.
Nick's the general manager at Pasture Map, and he's gonna. I'm really excited. We've been talking. Members of OpenTEAM have been working with Pasture Map for quite some time, so we're really excited to welcome them as new members within the OpenTEAM community. Just as a reminder, our goal with this in-depth series is really to build our knowledge base within the OpenTEAM community and foster collaboration so we can better serve each other across our membership needs. And so this is, again, the first of many presentations coming up. We're scheduling them now on a bi-weekly basis so that coming up, we will have, we're going to be having Field Print and Field to Market present next, and we'll be following that by a presentation by Light Farm and the work that the UBC team is diving into. Really excited about both of those. And then after that, we'll take a bit of a break, but we hope that you'll also all join the Unlocking Agricultural Data Revolution, the UMN virtual event from Thursday, September 24th through the 25th. And then we'll be back on our regular schedule following that. So we hope that you enjoy today's call, and again, we'll hand this off to Nick to take it away.
There we go. Let me share my screen and get to it. All right, very cool. All right, can you all see me or see this, I should say?
Yeah, we
Absolutely.
Yes.
Great. So super quickly, just as an intro about me, and thanks again for letting me kind of chat to everybody today. So I'm Nick Honegger. I'm the GM at Pasture Map. I'm also kind of my other hat that's a little relevant to the space is I'm an associate at Soilworks Natural Capital, which is the investment fund that owns Pasture Map. So I figured kind of in order of presentations, I'll tell you all a little bit about Soilworks because I think it's very relevant to the Pasture Map story and how I kind of came to be here. And also, I think Soilworks is going to be hopefully just as much as a partner and just as involved in OpenTEAM as Pasture Map is. So I think some background information on both will be pretty helpful. In terms of how I got here and kind of how Soilworks came about is we were started, there were two founders, Ed and Lou, based out of San Antonio, who started a very large B2B tech fund called Scaleworks. So hence Soilworks is where the name came from. We were super original there. But they kind of started a $90 million B2B tech fund here in San Antonio. And Lou Mormon has a ranch here as well. And they always had this kind of passion for agriculture. And we said, hey, can we take our kind of knowledge of scaling businesses and actually apply that to the regenerative space? So we came at this from a very humble approach. And we kind of had this mindset of, hey, we are pretty savvy at scaling businesses and creating go-to-market strategies. So could we find and work with organizations who are really passionate about regenerative agriculture like we are and kind of put two and two together. So with that, Soilworks was kind of born. So our kind of fancy marketing way we describe ourselves is we're a public benefit company on a mission to accelerate the regenerative food movement. So originally when we almost started the fund, we thought about making it a nonprofit because I think a lot of people get this idea of investment funds is very driven around ROI, especially in tech where it's kind of quick 1 to 3 year investment turnarounds. And then we really wanted to create a fund that stood out as a little bit different and say, look, we are actually much more focused around creating kind of advancements in the regenerative space. So if that means slower investments or things that are a lot more focused on things like carbon sequestered as a model of success versus strictly ROI, we wanted the kind of space to do so. So we settled on kind of a public benefit company because we thought that fit our mindset of, hey, we want farmers and ranchers to not have to live off of subsidies. So we don't want to create a nonprofit that is kind of required to drive off donations, right? So that was kind of our kind of big picture goal of how we got into this space. So we're a very new fund to the world. We're about 5 months old now, but we operate on these kind of 4 core principles, right, is we want to find and help organizations that are making better and healthier food. They're restoring plant and animal diversity. They regenerate the soil to store more water and carbon, and they're more kind of creating more profitable family farms. And we broke that down into this is what we're calling our SoilWorks ecosystem, and it kind of focuses in three spaces. So we're either going to find tools that help farmers and ranchers that are out there now, or help with supply chains along kind of getting what ranchers are creating to consumers, and obviously kind of consumer brands and education. And that's where we kind of see ourselves playing in this space. And one area we're really excited to kind of cooperate with OpenTEAM with is if there are kind of organizations or groups that are kind of fitting in any of these areas, if we can help in any way possible or work together, we're very, very excited and interested. And how PastureMap came into this is while we were kind of having these ideas and these concepts and mapping out the fund, Lou is actually a customer of PastureMap. And they were kind of looking for buyers at the time, and we thought it would be a very kind of exciting space to kind of dive into because they are a B2B tech platform kind of at their core. So we thought it would be a good way for us to kind of dive into the space and really kind of apply our knowledge into the world of regenerative. So with that being said, let's talk about the more exciting portion of this is what exactly is PastureMap. So they are a grazing management system that is focused around creating more profitable kind of ranches through regenerative grazing. So at the end of the day, we are kind of a map platform that has a lot of different data layers associated with that allows you to make better decisions on how to run and manage your ranch. I thought the coolest way to kind of go through a demo and talk about where we're headed is I'm going to show you a series of kind of screenshots of our platform that span a few years of kind of improvements, and I'll talk to you about what they do and how they function within our application and what the actual application does, but also it'll give you an idea and paint somewhat of a picture of how kind of we're looking to improve and push the system forward. That can kind of lead into some other ways we can collaborate with OpenTEAM and just give you all an idea of kind of what we're looking to do with the platform. So when you kind of dive into PastureMap, so your day one, you start an account, right? We take the mapping portion of our name very seriously. So at the end of the day, right, we've all seen this before, be it through the PastureMap platform or FarmOS. It's, hey, how can we draw kind of paddocks and subdivisions on a map interface? So it was kind of the humble origins of PastureMap is we said, okay, look, we want to start with basic map layers, right? So you go in, you put in your zip code of where you are and draw out your actual ranch into the system. And then we say, okay, now that you've actually kind of added your paddocks and added your land and your subdivisions, the next best thing is to have some historical way to track that. So what we did was we added a series of data layers, which again, you'll see this in a lot of systems, anything from grazing days, recovering days, forage consumed. The one I've got pulled up here is photos. So geotagged photos of actual ways to track what's changed with your land over time. So at the end of the day, I think that the core value that PastureMap provides is not just kind of tracking your grazing plans, but also being to validate the efforts of ranchers. I think what we've seen a lot, and kind of a lot of the feedback we've heard is there's this big push to be regenerative and all these reasons it's great for the soil, but how do we as ranchers kind of validate what we're doing aside from, just like writing down our grazing plans every year? So a big piece of that for us is, okay, let's embed kind of photo history logs and actual ways where if you can say, hey, look, here's all of the movements that I've done over the past 5 seasons. I can show you a kind of log history of what it's done for my land, and best case scenario, what it's done for my soil, right? So we kind of started with that photo view, and then as the system evolved, all right, we'll jump into the future, right? So a lot has kind of changed from a UI UX standpoint. And the reason this happened is we got a lot of feedback around, look, the mapping systems are great, but kind of I can print out Google Maps and satellite views and kind of draw my pastures. So what else can kind of PastureMap or these technology tools really provide for me that goes the extra mile? So we started doing a lot more in terms of data layering, just trying to make it a lot kind of replicate what we were seeing ranchers do on pen and paper. right? Where it's not just, hey, I'm going to go out and take photos and kind of scroll through my iPhone to see how my land's changed, but it's, hey, where's my herd at currently? Where are my fences? Or where is my, like, I need to go send a ranch hand out. Where do I need to send them? So we have spent a lot of time on trying to figure out how to make our maps smarter, if you will. A lot of our kind of investments, be it kind of now or in the future, around how do we make just better decisions around ranching platforms. So as we've kind of evolved, the UI's gotten a little smarter. You can do a little bit more advanced things on the data layers, anything from adding water units to herds themselves to tasks for your ranch hands. And then once we got all that set up in the system, we found there was the next question, right? Like, hey, now that all the data is in PastureMap, what do we do with it? Like, how do we make it smarter? How do we kind of apply some math on our back end to make it a little more usable for ranchers? Because we found out that everyone was asking very similar questions, right? Where it's, hey, if I put all this information in here, it's how do I do grazing days? How do I calculate rest days? So then we kind of visualize that as well. So we use very kind of simple color coding systems, and these are customizable within the application in terms of day thresholds. But typically we find this is, I took the kind of relative average that we've got. But the goal is we want our users to be able to at a glance look at PastureMap and say, okay, here are my kind of at-risk areas. Here are places that probably need to rest more, or oh my gosh, I really need to move the herds out of here because they've been kind of overgrazing this land, and give them that ability to just make better decisions on the fly. I think one of the things we're very focused on is we want to be a tool in the space, kind of something the rancher can use, but not take over their decision making. It's a lot more about empowering a better decision making process based off the information they have at hand, versus some sort of automated tool that tells them like, hey, this is exactly when your herds need to move. Because at the end of the day, if it rains too much, or there's a drought, or things that have to be a little bit more flexible, I think ranchers will know that better than we will. So our job at PastureMap is to say, look, here's all of the kind of data and equations around what you need to be doing with your forage intakes and projected animal growth. So as variables change, you can input that into our system, and we'll offer you suggestions, and then you can kind of implement those or make them as you choose, versus kind of trying to take over what they're up to themselves. So then we say, look, we took all that data and we tried to kind of put it into a system that then makes it smarter and provides more of an overview. So as we kind of updated the system again, we were super fortunate that Christine and George, who were the original founders of PastureMap, left us with a really great kind of foundational story here, where all of this was kind of built as we acquired PastureMap. So it's been great to kind of see ranchers kind of positive feedback around it. But anything from as soon as you log in, you get a kind of summary view of all of your herds and what they're doing, and kind of plan moves for those days. We found this has been super valuable for a couple of reasons. One is just in terms of timing for ranchers. They want to see information that is kind of quickly presented to them. So one thing that we've learned is this little kind of overview tab is what we call it. Is one of the preferred or kind of highlight things we hear a lot of feedback about in terms of what people enjoy, because rather than having to dig through kind of every single tab or kind of remember exactly where your herds are going and go to herds, they can say, look, if I just want to log in and see what's going on today, I have the ability to do that. And then we also kind of highlight things that are important or should be brought to their attention. So it's, hey, if you have overdue moves, these are kind of like things you should work on, where it's like, we wanted to have the ability to say, look, if I only have 5 minutes to check into PastureMap before I have to drive out to the field, or I'm kind of checking this on my phone as I'm ATVing out to repair a fence, I know, oh man, but I have to at least get this herd moved. And I think it's all about reinforcing that ability for a quick, informed decision-making on the fly, and then being able to capture that. So that way it's repeatable, it's be able to done season through season, and then pulling in other data that they're already looking at. So one of the reasons I chose this kind of overview screenshot is it shows that actually we pull in ADAs based off of kind of information they'll put in about their herds. We pull in rainfall data from their local kind of meteorological stations, and just allow them to leverage that data on top of the data they're already using. So our big focus, right, is what are other data providers, what are other kind of companies that are kind of helping ranchers out already, and can we layer that into the platform just so when they go to make grazing decisions, they can leverage as many things as possible, right? Because it's just difficult. I think grazing management is not, it's much easier said than done. I think anything from weather changes to kind of different forage intakes will alter what you're going to do with your seasonal plans. So the more we can put that in one very simplified space, it just creates a better environment for our users. So then what we do after they kind of have all of their data in that spot is we allow them to do deep dives into certain areas of the application. So here is kind of an example of, look, we created all of those pastures and paddocks earlier. So what if we want to actually zoom in and see how that's performing, or see how that is going from a kind of what herds are there, or just get more information on kind of my individual pieces of land. So all I've done in my kind of slide transition is, if I were to click on any of those paddocks that we had drawn out, it will show me kind of a deep dive area of, hey, here's how big this is, here's the parameter, here's the kind of dry matter, animal days that I've spent there, forage grades this season, if I've hayed the pasture at all, and if that's going to change kind of any of the grazing plans. And again, you'll see our big focus for all of this is, how do we make the information just very readily available, so it's at a glance, where if I'm worried about an individual paddock's performance, I don't have to go kind of look at my rest days as a total. I don't have to go pull up every kind of herd that's been there. I can just zoom into that paddock, and all that information is presented for me. And I think, again, it's just reinforcing that idea of we want to design a very flexible platform where if a rancher says, hey, I'm curious about this piece of land. Okay, great. Everything you should have a question about is one click away. So then we kind of took that same mindset and applied it to our animals as well, right? So if I were to say, hey, I zoomed into my paddock and kind of here's what I saw, so now I want to go kind of learn more about this herd that I've got moving around. So this is our kind of pretend herd that we've had living in that ranch I showed you earlier. So the Beretta, right? And there's 19 animals in it. I can pull the average weight, I can pull their dry matter intake, their target ADG, and you can kind of change these based off the kind of weight systems or kind of what you're feeding them and all of that. But the goal is just to make it very flexible. So based off whatever the ranch is using, we'll support that kind of functionality. And then what we do is, based off of your inputs, is we actually forecast out what will happen to your herd if they're getting the dry matter intake and their average daily gains that you're seeing, what it will actually look like at the end of the season, or at the end of however long you kind of have them forecasted in the platform. And the reason we do this is we just kind of, in full recognition, it's no one's going out every day, or maybe there are, but props to them, because it's very difficult to weigh your herd every day, right? To kind of ensure check-in dates. So what we do to make that easier is say, look, if you're actually having herds in these areas that are consuming the amount of forage you think they are, and they all weigh this amount of weight, and we'll kind of generate check-in days for you to say, all right, we'll go in and weigh your herd or weigh some kind of sample cattle on these days to make sure they're on track. And if everything's going well, here's what it'll kind of be at the end of the season. And then on top of that, just to make sure, again, all that information is very centralized in one location, you can see notes on the herd that might impact these end of season numbers, right? So if they had to go, for the sake of the example, right, go to the doctor for pink eye, or if you're moving herds, animals in and out, like let's say if you're kind of helping some animals graze, or you want to increase the size of the herd, or you're doing kind of rental cattle where they're, hey, I'll graze them for 2 months with my group, and then we're going to move them out. It's all just designed to be very flexible and kind of account for that. So you'll notice, again, you have it accessed all kind of in one view. And like all of our other systems, you can kind of click to deep dive to get more information. But the goal is to just provide ranchers with at-a-glance information that then they can then deep dive or add more information to. And it all ties back to whatever subdivision or map data layer that they live on. So then what do we do with all this information, right? Because I think it's very clear to see that PastureMap is our main kind of function, is this kind of data warehouse where we say, look, we're going to take a bunch of information from our users and a bunch of information that's public from like NRCS or kind of weather data and layered on top of everything. So kind of our newest kind of feature, if you will, which launched a little earlier, I guess kind of the later end of 2019, is our forage forecasting and kind of seasonal planning tool that I've got kind of showing here. And the nice part about this is we found that after we created kind of all of our map data, right, this really kind of intuitive tool where it's no matter where you click, you can deep dive and see what's impacting your grazing plan. We weren't actually replacing their grazing plans, right? We were just giving them a lot of data to then go back to their kind of pen and paper and kind of map out their season, which wasn't the best user experience, right? Because we had all the data there, so we wanted to figure out a way to actually help them kind of forecast their seasons and run predictions, like what if it doesn't rain, or what if we have to change our grazing days, or how do I kind of do my stocking calculations? So what we did was create a system that essentially automates that process for them, so they can do what we call scenario planning and seasonal forecasting. So what this does, and what this kind of GIF is showing, is this will pull every data layer that you have out of PastureMap, and it will show every herd you've got, when they're resting, what paddock they're kind of grazing in, how many rest days it is, and kind of put all of that culmination into one to create what is like your traditional grazing plan that you kind of map out on pen and paper and actually generate it all for you. And the nice part about this is that ranchers can create this and then do a couple of things. They can export this if they don't want, like, just kind of print it out. We have some ranchers that actually make big, almost poster-sized versions of this and hang it up on the wall. And they're, all right, that's our season. So if we have to make any changes, that's kind of like what we base it off of. Or they'll sit and actually do kind of forecasts, or kind of what happens if we change the amount of grazing days, or can we kind of run this grass a little harder, or do we have to hay it this time? And again, it's all about how do we present information in the most kind of obvious and usable way so our ranchers are empowered to make better decisions. I think my favorite story that came out of this advancement is we've had ranchers save over $100,000 in hay costs because they were able to look at their kind of seasonal rotation and say, hey, I actually think we can kind of move some dates around here. So let's play with it in the forecast tool and see if it has an impact on our grass or on kind of the amount of feed we need. And it was a pretty drastic event. I wish I could say we've saved everyone over $100,000, but they're not. I mean, they're not all that kind of great. But most of them are kind of very high numbers in terms of just feed changes. And it's not like we're adding anything new. Again, it's just how do we present information in a way that's easily digestible so they can make better decisions and kind of go through the platform. So that's kind of the core focus of PastureMap and kind of what we do as a platform and kind of our main focus. So in terms of what's next for PastureMap, because there's a lot on the radar, we're super excited because since we've taken over PastureMap and since I've stepped in, we've grown the team from we had one kind of core group. So it went from a team of 3, we're about a team of 6 right now. We're heavily investing in the development side and doing some more robust work for kind of customer success and really ensuring ranchers can be onboarded and trained to get excited about the platform. So what that means is, all right, now that we've got kind of a more robust team, what do we do with the platform? So step one on our end, which you started to kind of see in some of the screenshots I've showed, and there's some more really exciting stuff coming through the end of September around UI and UX improvements across our web and mobile platforms. And this is where, again, it's how do we really create and push features that are just really radically easy for ranchers to use. I think we don't want anything to be more than kind of 2 clicks away for easy decision making. So we're kind of reapproaching how we view the platform. So the rancher can kind of live on that map data layer and click through and make decisions strictly based off of that. And then if they have to make changes or whatnot, it's all 1 or 2 clicks, and then they're back to their map, which is kind of where they spend 90% of their time. Another thing we're looking to do is increase mobile functionality. As I'm sure everyone on this call knows, most ranchers spend their time on the ranch or on the land versus kind of at their desktop. So we've done a lot to kind of make offline mode and things like that work. One thing that we're kind of toying with is an idea, because what we've seen, if you've got a much larger institution where you've got maybe maybe 10 to 20 people out on the ranch at different times, and they're all have no service. There's a very interesting issue when it comes to data syncing, and it kind of reminded us of the old kind of code checkout issues of early development days, where it's okay, well, if everyone's working on the code base at the same time, kind of what do we do? So I think one thing we've kind of tossed around, which I'm actually really curious to kind of pick y'all's brains around at some point in some of the upcoming meetings, is do we create an actual kind of checkout mode where, hey, if I want to go like lock out this paddock, very similar to old school like SVN days, if anyone ever used SVN repositories, of I'm actually going to just lock this out and no one else can change it or make updates except for me in terms of cattle movements or kind of range updates. Or if I'm fixing a fence, I can say, look, this is kind of my area of the ranch. And then when I go back to kind of home base where I've got service, I can push that data up. So we're really curious on ways to just make that overall a better experience for our ranchers. I think that's just an issue that everyone's kind of seeing and dealing with, is that what do you do in a world where there's not Wi-Fi everywhere you see, or there's not service? So I think improving that's going to be just interesting for anyone in this space in the coming future. Another kind of big next step for PastureMap and also SoilWorks is validating and supporting ranchers with data. And this kind of very much connects to soil and carbon capture tools. But one thing we've heard a lot about is the switch to regenerative isn't always the easiest thing for ranchers to do. There's kind of that initial step is like, oh, okay, if I'm going to go from kind of traditional cropping or traditional grazing to regenerative, there's some benefits I lose in terms of kind of the old school, like I've always done it this way. Like, why am I going to change it? I've had this farm in my family for whatever, hundreds of years. Why is it time to kind of change how I graze now? So what we're trying to do is take a lot of anonymized data from ranchers around the country and around the world and say, hey, if you were to take your land mass, right, and you were to kind of map it out in our system and then use that seasonal forecasting tool, you can see the impacts of what it would have on your land before actually making that jump. And I think that's going to be a critical piece in kind of advancing regenerative into the future, is that we need to find ways to win over kind of the non-regenerative ranchers, if you will, in kind of two ways. One, I think we'll win that battle through kind of validating that it's more profitable, right? You can actually do better decisions and make more money and have a better return on your land by doing it kind of this way. And two, I think there's always going to be that environmental impact where people like really do care of what you can do when you're sequestering more carbon and kind of that save the planet story. But just the business person in me really thinks that if we can go around and say, look, if you just change the way you operate your land and change nothing else, right? It's just the way you're moving cattle and kind of you've already got the land in place, it will generate this much more revenue for your ranch. So we've got a lot of case studies done on our end in terms of people having like being able to stock almost 1,000 more cattle based off how they're kind of moving their kind of herd around and kind of better optimizing their food. And so I think those are the stories that we're trying to highlight and better kind of create within the system, because I think that's truly what's going to kind of push more people into the regenerative space, is that, oh my gosh, if they're creating that much more revenue just from these few kind of management changes, what could I do kind of in this space of regenerative? So the more we can create that, better. And then in terms of soil carbon kind of capture, it's no secret that carbon credits are kind of the hidden door behind a lot of questions these days, where it's, hey, if we could just unlock, how do we kind of validate the carbon we're sequestering and sell it, be it in voluntary markets or mandatory markets, depending on where the rancher is located. There's a ton of value and revenue there. So where I think PastureMap is really trying to play a role in that space is, look, we've got 7+ million acres under management right now. We've got a lot of ranchers that know carbon credits are coming in some way or another. So all of their data, as you've seen, is already living in the PastureMap system. So we're working with a lot of organizations now to say, hey, if we gave you access, or if you can see the map layers or see the kind of herd movements that PastureMap has been doing, is there a way you can help us calculate how much carbon they've been sequestering, with the end goal of saying, okay, great. So when carbon credits do become more mainstream or easily sellable, we can go to all of our ranchers and say, look, if you can go into go to the app and click one button to kind of sell your credits, and all of a sudden we've made you X amount of dollars for the stuff you're already doing. And I know that sounds way kind of more into the future than it probably is. But I'm very confident that someone at some point is going to solve the carbon credit model, and we really want to create and kind of pre-design our platform to support ranchers where if they're actually doing regenerative ranching correctly and restoring the soil and kind of sequestering carbon, I think rewarding them is just the most logical thing to do. So I think creating that is going to be kind of critical in the coming year, and hopefully sooner than that, but we'll see. I think it's kind of a mixture of technology and politics, and hopefully we get there sooner rather than later. So I did want to show a little bit of a sneak preview of some of the things we're working on versus just kind of talking through them. So I'm super excited about kind of soil health and soil carbon. So I'll show you some kind of incoming screenshots of things we've been doing in an exciting kind of project that the team launched with Point Blue about a year ago, just to show you, I think, some of the examples of what we can do when we start kind of layering extra data on top of map functionality. So just to kind of give you a bit of a description of what some of these graphs are these are different soil data and soil kind of health metrics overlaid on the Pasture Map system. So we kind of took, had a bunch of kind of beta users go take soil tests at different parts of their ranch, and then loaded that into kind of the Point Blue system, and then layered it over Pasture Map data. And it does a couple of things. So it's nowhere near perfect yet, but I think it's kind of an interesting kind of showcase of what you can do, right? Because you can take kind of soil health data and then layer that back onto kind of photographs to showcase, okay, how's the land improved over the past couple of seasons? Are we actually seeing more kind of healthy like grass gains, or has it changed what the forage looks like? I think there's, as we all know, there's a visual difference you can tell as the land gets more healthy. So that is kind of the easiest sanity check of, okay, I can take soil test data and then layer that on top of picture data to see, are the improvements we're seeing actually because of kind of what we've been doing, right? Because we'll be able to see like the soil looks healthier. There's like more forage there. There's more stuff growing, right? The ecosystem is more robust, and we can make that connection. And then we can map that over your actual herd movements to say, okay, if I'm moving my herd this way, is it helping create better forage? Is it helping actually improve the soil health? What is it doing over time? And I think the key here is remembering, again, that Pasture Map and the role we play is never going to be telling ranchers exactly what they're supposed to be doing, but it's going to be, how can you leverage all the data we provide you to make better decisions? So if I can tell you, look, based off of your soil health and how it's changed over the past 2 seasons, it's because you've been doing these herd movements. If you can keep doing that, here's like the projected gains in forage you'll get. Here's the projected kind of gains, be it anything from more grass, or like you can kind of have more animals graze it or graze it more aggressively, or maybe you have to extend your rest days because it's not having a big impact as you thought. I think they just need that information. So we're working on ways to just provide that to them a lot easier. And I think these pictures are particularly exciting because it shows when we find organizations like Point Blue that are willing to say, look, you can leverage our systems on top of your maps. We can create some really kind of interesting data layers for our ranchers to look at. So and again, this is just kind of one little piece that we're working on now. It's still in beta for a few users. I think we're looking for more kind of interesting data points that we can layer on top of this. And 2, even if it's not solar carbon related, I think we got really excited about the idea of looking for other partners that have just interesting data they can capture, that they can layer onto Pasture Map. When we were showing some of these slides off to another group that was kind of talking with us, they do very high-tech kind of water sensing. So anywhere you have kind of water troughs or areas that your animals would go to naturally drink, they're like, hey, we have all this great sensing data, but what do we do with it? Like, no one wants to buy just water sensing data. It has to live on something else. So it's like, great, let's partner together and we can kind of connect via an API and just add another data to our map. And I really think that's where Pasture Map is going to be exciting in the years to come, is working with other groups to just make our data layers more accessible, and helping kind of push maybe a common data standard. So be it if you're writing it for Pasture Map or any of like OpenFarm, it should be an easy way to say, look, if we can provide useful data for ranchers, here's how you pull it into your system, and here's how we can all work together. Because at the end of the day, it's how can we make everyone win in the kind of race to be more regenerative. So with that being said, in terms of partnership goals and why we're really excited to work with OpenTEAM, here's kind of what we're looking for. We're very vested in helping support, I would say, open data standards. And that in my mind means, I think there's no secret, there's Pasture Maps out there. There's a bunch of other grazing tool organizations, from kind of Open Farm OS to kind of Maya and a few others, but everyone's kind of working in kind of different silos. And I think one thing that will kind of help everybody in the long run is finding out, hey, even if we all have kind of different benefits or different kind of core values, is there a way we can say, hey, but if we're going to import map data, or if we're going to import like forage kind of concepts or whatever kind of APIs we're working with, can we say, let's all make it a universal standard? We're doing this at like a very basic level, but just for an example, so everything you do in Pasture Map can be exported in basic kind of like CSV files. Is that a perfect world? Like, no, I wish it could be kind of more robust API calls and we can all talk to each other just like through backend kind of functionality. But at the end of the day, it means if you're in Pasture Map and you want to export your animal records, or if you want to import stuff from, say, CattleMax, it's very easy, right? It's not locking anyone into any systems. It's creating just ways for ranchers to say, look, here's how I can leverage better tools. So if I want to import a bunch of information into Pasture Map, great, we'll kind of accept the kind of general data terms. And I think if we could get together as a community or kind of decide, hey, if we're going to do map data layers or soil health metrics, like here's the whatever top 20 metrics everyone kind of wants and needs. Here's how we can kind of import them and export them into each other so everybody can create better software at the end of the day. Another thing we're trying to do is collaborate with members trying to solve similar problems. So if someone's like, hey, we are very vested in the carbon credit space right now, would love to try and figure out if it's something we can help. Can we share data that makes it kind of help you validate what's going on? Are there soil test information that you need from us? Is there something maybe SoilWorks can help with versus Pasture Map in particular? But we are just extremely excited and trying to find others in the community that are interested in providing either better data for ranchers on the Pasture Map side, or anyone that fits into that kind of three-pronged ecosystem of SoilWorks, where how can we kind of just push regenerative ranching forward, be it for consumers, for suppliers, or for ranchers themselves. And the final other kind of big goal for us is learn about the other efforts going on in the regenerative community and just figure out where we can support. Like I said at the very beginning of this conversation, we are kind of coming from a more technical business scaling background. We are very humble about the fact that I don't think we're ever going to out regenerative like the Alan Savorys and Gabe Browns of the world. But what we can do, and what we're excited about, is that we have the resources to help support the next one, right? So whoever the next Gabe Brown is, or whoever's on that next mission or has that next kind of super innovative concept to help spread that to the world, we really want to help them, be it from a partnership side, or if it's financially, or whatever it may be, right? Maybe it's just, hey, we can make a connection where, we can put two and two together. We are really excited to be a part of this community, and excited to learn more and figure out where and when we can be useful. So with that being said, I tried to leave 20-ish minutes for questions because I figured that's more useful than me just yapping it all. So I think I'm relatively on time, but thanks again for letting me speak to everyone here. We were super excited to be a part of the community now and kind of diving in to see where we can help, but happy to dive more into the SoilWorks or Pasture Map information, or kind of go from there.
Thanks so much, Nick. It's really, I'm so glad to have a sort of this reintroduction. As I mentioned at the top, we've been had Christine on a couple times, I think, as OpenTEAM's evolved sort of in parallel, and so it's really exciting to sort of reintroduce with SoilWorks engagement and sort of expanded context. And also, I mean, it's amazing. I think this is where we're seeing within the community the importance of continually checking in, because each of our projects are moving fairly quickly. And so even in the, in the last 6-9 months, there's substantial releases that have happened and work that we've already done on and changes in the UI and UX, and also the real focus on the data-driven storytelling piece, which I think will have a lot of resonance with the community here. So I always have lots of questions, but I do want to make sure that we open up for others. Leah or Laura. I'm going to prompt either of you.
Yeah. Oh, I was
Go
going to
ahead.
say that was a great presentation. I learned a lot, both about SoilWorks and about what's coming up for Pasture Map. I think we also have the shared goals of getting ecosystem service markets up and going, and the idea of one click and a farmer accesses that. So I was wondering, so for SoilWorks, how do they envision using open source code in the future, or is it more focused on kind of the data standards that you talked about?
So I think it's a bit open right now. The poor choice of words there, but so we are trying to figure that out as we go. So PastureMap is our first kind of full buyout, if you will. A lot of our other kind of things on the table are minority/majority stake investments. So we don't necessarily have as much pull in terms of, hey, you have to open source X, Y, Z. So the approach we're taking is, look, we know PastureMap is very much a data warehouse. So one thing we can do immediately for the open source community is figure out, hey, how can we do exports and imports that talk to each other? And then how else can we, the other kind of thing that SoilWorks is very kind of passionate about is we want to be able to leverage and validate what ranchers are up to. So if that means finding a kind of universal standard for carbon credits, like, oh my, we'd love to figure that out, because like that's just something we're struggling with now. It's like, hey, what equation do we use? Is it the Comet Farm? Is it some other thing? Who knows, right? So I think we're trying to find like what are ways we can open source almost the math on the back end of the validation, and we all kind of take that back and use it however we need. But we're very interested on just trying to, how do we use kind of open source projects to validate efforts of what people are working on.
Yeah, I think we also have like hubs that are already interested in probably trying that out, the export import function, and how connecting that to one of OpenTEAM's members like Nori or ESMC.
Yeah.
A great use case there. So thank you.
Yeah.
Nick, this is Sarah from Regen Network. Our soil organic carbon grasslands methodology for ranching accomplishes everything that you talked about wanting to do in this webinar. So I would like to talk to you personally, because we've already done everything that you're talking about, and have the ability to potentially partner strategically to accomplish those aims in a very quick manner, because we're already at the automation stage for all of our remote sensing methodologies.
That would be lovely. You can shoot me an email if you want, or I'll find your email on the invite. I'd be very, very interested to talk to you and learn more.
Great.
Yeah, I'll throw in there too that we're building the soil sampling app for the ESMC process, which will be kind of white labelable for other people to use. So it would be the kind of like stratification tool, and then carbon stocking kind of that the sort of tool chain associated with that process that might also be useful in terms of pushing data to you as well. So there's probably some collaboration there as well. We were also just had the last 3 hours talking about integrations with other services, using kind of an integrations tool as using a common farm data structure. And I think as input services like you guys are and we are, and Heartland does as well, and other Light Farm, as we start to recognize the number of APIs and the overhead associated with managing those APIs, the more we can collaborate in reducing that API management, the better. And I think there's some real opportunities to do that, I think, as a community. So
no, I totally agree. I was kind of laughing when because I keep calling this kind of like data warehouse. How do we integrate? And it reminded me more of almost I wish we could have like a Zapier for all of the kind of farm apps out there.
Exactly what we were just
right. I was like, I think that will resonate with, if you haven't used the tool, it's a very awesome way to kind of get around not having APIs, and it's just so
Yep.
easy to use. And it's like, man, if we could just create where, hey, if I do X sourcing, I can push it to PastureMap, and it's just like, that would be my dream in terms of what we could accomplish with more of like an open standard.
So Nick,
I think it's achievable. Yep.
So yeah, Nick, one of our standard questions on these are like, what, how do you see the OpenTEAM help you reach your goals, and sort of looking out in terms of what are some of the tools that might be difficult on your own, but that in collaboration we might be able to achieve. So it sounds like this is definitely emerging from our side, and it sounds like it speaks to you as well.
No, absolutely. And I think you all have heard this a lot, but for everyone else on the call, I keep kind of joking that I said, just be very patient with us at first, because we're trying to scale our dev team from what was essentially nothing to 5 or so devs. So we're still hiring them on. But the thing we are so focused on is how do we curate this, be it API or data share system, where like it would just be so useful in my mind to say, hey, if you're looking at this sensor, where do you want it to go after you like sense the information? Is it Pasture Map? Is it some other tool? And there's no way we can solve that on our own. But what we can do is, figure out how to import that data or export it to whatever systems you're using for. So I'd be super, super interested to kind of tackle that one.
Well, I think you'll find some depth in this community on precisely that. We were joking this morning. There's a number of us pre-OpenTEAM who worked on a project called Open Pipe Kit, which was all about that, essentially pulling from multiple sources and then pushing to where you want it to go. So that's super current. Greg, do you want to pick up? I sort of cut you off there, so I want to give you a chance to continue your question.
No, I just think that there's clear opportunities to help connect the input services, which there's a lot. You're primarily an input service, with the what do you call them, Dorn? But like the Comet Farms and Cool Farm tools and stratification tools, those kind of services, and there's just a lot of opportunity for collaboration. So, I'm gonna generate kind of a new epic based on the discussions that we had this morning. I'd love to throw it over to you to just review, and then you can kind of see what we're thinking about, and then kind of join in that conversation. So.
Oh yeah, please do.
Great. And as this is a little bit inside for the OpenTEAM group, but again, this is the kind of mapping that we're diving into in terms of the larger technology landscape and roadmaps across projects that we're really working on over the next month. So we're really excited to incorporate some of your development roadmap, Rick, into that process, and really elevate some of these points of intersection that are seem to be emerging fairly clearly. Others want to open it up for other questions or comments from the group.
Nick,
go ahead, Frank.
Oh yeah, Nick, I had a question. You mentioned, I think, 7 million acres under management using the app. I was really curious how you've recruited and found those ranches, and also just kind of the variation in the detail and quality of information that different ranches are using. I imagine there's a lot of variation just in terms of maybe just putting up maps to really diligently logging every single movement.
Yeah, so I have to give 100% props and kudos to Christina and George, who ran this ship before I did, because a lot of that kind of initial rancher gain and a lot of those acres were all kind of started under them. But from kind of what we've seen and how we've kind of gotten there so far is it's a lot of community engagement. Honestly, it's word of mouth. It's finding ways we can kind of partner with other ranchers or kind of educational institutions that are teaching regenerative grazing, and then just being there and being supportive. I know it's very cliche to say, oh, just have people like you and talk about it, and it gets you more. But honestly, oddly enough, that's worked pretty well for us. The other thing that's helped a lot too is we have a pretty robust trial environment that then rolls into a free plan. So if ranchers are a bit slower to adopt, they're not kind of gated out of the content, if that makes sense. I think what you find is some of our and this kind of to kind of answer the second part of your question as well, some of our users aren't super technically literate, but this is better than kind of pen and paper for them. So it just takes them a little bit more time to get acquainted with the platform. So what we've done is try and create just a really low risk option for them to sign up and try it. And I think that's helped user growth a lot there. And then in terms of robustness of data usage, we see anything from I would say the power users who are using us every day, and a lot of those kind of stories of people saving like 6 figures on hay, or figuring out they can have like 100 or 1,000 extra cattle on the ranch. Those are more like the power users, right? Where they're analyzing everything every day and logging. Some of our users log 4+ moves a day per herd, which is, I don't know how they do that without logging it. It's just wild. So, and then at the other side of that, we've got users where they're kind of just trying to get their map data in and say, look, I want to use y'all for animal records, and to log my land. And then if I can figure out how to do like better mapping or better herd management later on, like I'll get there. So we're trying to take a stance of creating a customer success team that's, I don't want to say hand holding, but I'm more just like we're in this together kind of approach where it's, hey, if you want to hop on the call and just talk about how we think we can better help you set up the application or get your herds in line or just talk grazing management strategy, like let's get on a call. And that's helped a lot. And I know not everyone has the capacity to do that. So take that with a bit of a grain of salt. But I think the lesson learned for us is just to be super open around how people are going to use the application. And then if it looks like their usage is low or not kind of up to par with some more heavy users, use that as an opportunity to reach out with kind of an olive branch and say, hey, we'd love to like figure out how to get you from A to B. Like, can we just sit down and have a call? And maybe it's an education thing. Maybe they're just not using the platform. But I think changing that mindset in our mind around from, hey, this looks like a user that's just going to turn off the platform, kind of this negative approach to, hey, this looks like an opportunity for us to make a new friend and show them how to use the technology better. And that just works. Most of the time it's option B, right? They're just like, look, I've got a lot of stuff going on. This is just really new to me, right? Like, so it's like, okay, great. Let's figure out how to make it less scary and more approachable. And that's why a lot of the stuff we're doing around the UI and UX is changing. It's all about this. Like a lot of our competitors, if you will, in this space it's pen and paper, right? And which is, it's hard to beat that. It's hard to beat customizability with kind of drawing around on a map and stuff. So I think we just have to be super cognizant of, hey, if you want to just chat about like how to use this or chat about grazing strategy, we're here for you. And we'll kind of sit through emails or send you video demos. And that's why you're going to see a lot more kind of knowledge-based articles and self-guide YouTube videos come up from us in the coming year. Because I think that's going to be such a critical piece. It's that education component. Because it's tricky. Yeah. Like it's hard now. We don't,
I think that really highlights what we're trying to support within the OpenTEAM communities, how to do that support as we're transitioning to have our hubs and networks, provided with the appropriate type of support through that process. So it's another area from our perspective, I think that we're excited to engage with your teams and ideally vice versa as we learn how to do that support process better and create community in this process.
No, absolutely. One of the things we've been trying to do too is figure out, are there education hubs that we can plug into to say, look, if you need to teach ranchers more about regenerative on a platform, can we make ours accessible or open or whatever for that educational environment? And maybe it's not always us, and maybe it is, but I just think there's so many people out there trying to teach how to do regenerative better. So I think the more we can get together as a community to say, look, here's how you can leverage all these different tools. And we're not going to say whatever one you pick is great because it's going to get you to be more regenerative, and just here's how you use them and kind of expose everyone to what's out there.
So I was going to prompt Leah. I think the internet has been actually a little spotty up there, but if Leah or Cora or Simone are there, I think this is very relevant to their line of work here within the community.
Yeah, definitely. And I was a user of Pasture Map for the last 2 years, and it was amazing to use. I think having all of those data layers, and Nick and I have talked about this a little bit too, but having all those data layers and being able to just very quickly look at your screen and see what needs to happen was really beneficial, especially working with a big crew who all had to set up different things on different days. But also I am very excited for the direction that you're moving in. And the additions that you're planning to work on in the next few months. And the last thing I wanted to say is, as you were mentioning how feedback is super important for you all, and you've been integrating a lot of that feedback into your work, even prior to you purchasing PastureMap, we had a very great experience with that as well. And we're able to, get our feedback into the next phase of development very easily and efficiently. And so I have, PastureMap was amazing, and I'm excited that this is happening.
No, that's great to hear. I think, like I said, we were super fortunate in that the founders before us did such an amazing job at kind of community engagement and reaching out. So I think, but a big shoes to fill on my part. But if what we can do is just continue to be an open door for feedback and listen to the community to create what's needed, I think to me that's the biggest kind of mark of success for us.
Yeah.
Any last comments before we get to the top of the hour? If not, I'd want to just thank Nick again for this reintroduction, and we're really excited. I mean, as we've said before, I think that this in-depth series will be coming back around for regular updates as we all evolve, and we want to again welcome Nick to the community and participation in our tech working groups, but clearly there will be intersection with our hub and network and user-centered design process as well. So we're excited about that. And this is an aside before we close, but we're excited right now as we're putting a LoRa network on with wireless fencing, looking at how that affects some of our on-farm communications as well. So that's a follow-up later for you, Nick.
That's great.
Thanks again, Nick, and thank everybody for participating here. Again, lots of follow-up, and I hope to see you at the next in-depth coming up with field market and field print in 2 weeks.
Thank you all. Thanks again, Nick.
Yeah, thank you all so much. I appreciate the time.
Yeah.